So thanks for Christina for her presentation of the natural language processing. And right now it's my turn. It's Katarina, actually, Katarina Grubarova from CE. I am a lawyer and I will guide you through the topic of the intersections between the law and AI within the EU. You may have heard that actually there is a regulation right now prepared in EU in terms of regulation of AI, the so-called AI Act. But this is not the sole objective of my presentation today, because I would like to talk also about the currently applicable laws and the way how they interact with the AI systems already. Maybe I would just in the beginning mention the objective of the regulation, because the regulation itself is sometimes viewed as something negative which should be rather avoided, but it's not autotelic. When we are talking about the AI as a novel technology, it's really important to create a safe space for users to actually use it and promote their trust into the technology, which also brings the legal certainty at the end of the day that if you are complying with the rules and the regulation, that the time that you invest in your product is actually going to pay off in terms that you are able to place it on the market and really bring the commercial value as well, and you are not going to face the legal obstacles. So when we are talking about the state of current regulation, I would maybe simplify the topic of AI system into three legally relevant topics, because I understand that the AI is something which is complicated and advanced in technology, but for the purposes of law, it's better to talk about some known concepts. And these are mainly the data inputs, their processing, and the data outputs. When we are talking about the inputs, then you probably, as maybe technology people or business people, would think that the more data you have, the better the output of the AI system will be. But from the legal perspective, it's not entirely true, because you have to look into your data set and identify what type of data and titles you have to the data, so that you are not going to face a situation where you might be restricted from using it, like, for instance, the current situation with the ChatGPT and the issues which it has with privacy laws in Italy. Then you will definitely need to look for the accuracy of the data set, because once your data is in some way let's call it traumatized or contaminated by some bias, then probably your output is not going to be any better, and it will cause you some further obstacles in terms of compliance with applicable laws. And finally, you may need to think about the access to the data, because at the beginning, it might be advantage that it is only you who has the access to the data set. But later on, when you are successful on the market and you are building kind of a monopoly, then the anti-monopoly office or authorities may come and investigate and look for the ways how to offer your data sets or your data to others. So it's good to think upfront about some reasonable workaround or patch for this type of situations. When we move further, we talk about the processing, which is the key for the explainability and the transparency of AI systems. And again, as business or technology person, you would probably think about it in a restrictive way, that you don't want your competition to know anything about the inner structure of your product. But imagine that you would be in the position where you are involved in the car accident caused by a driverless car, or you are denied a loan because a system actually didn't evaluate you as eligible person. So you may need to think about maybe some general way how to explain on basis of what your system actually decides about some kind of evaluation, and what are the data which are being used for that evaluation. But you need to be prepared to provide reasoning in ad hoc situation where particular decision was made and it affected someone. because this is really something which will contribute to your accountability and make the system compliant. And with the output of the processing, we are coming to the final determination which needs to be made in terms of the AI product, because this is something which really influences our relationship, and this is how the AI demonstrates in real life. Now, the AI systems do not have something like an inherent set of moral values or codes of morals. And this needs to be instilled in them. Otherwise, they may be in interactions with legal rights, which are not legally compliant, and you may want to avoid them because they are breaching fundamental human rights, or they are somehow prohibited in terms of market practices. And you may also want to think about the attribution of liability, because that's very relevant not only in the negative sense of word when we are talking about criminal or civil liability, but it's also very relevant when it comes to the product itself and the rights which may be attached to the product, because it might be an invention or some kind of creation which can be further monetized, and you might want to really exercise rights there too. So this is about the current laws, and let's move to the AI regulation, the EU AI Act, which is not adopted yet. It is right now only discussed, and there should be a plenary vote in European Parliament regarding the regulation in May. There will be the transition period for 3 years, and it is going to be applicable to all of the systems placed, used, or somehow developed in EU. So it is like wide-ranging. And what is novel about this regulation is the fact that it is the first one which in the EU is going to govern specifically AI. So it contains the AI definition, which is based on two things, basically. First of all, it's one of the techniques which is listed in the annex to the regulation and which needs to be involved in the technology. And second thing is that the system itself is capable of actions which would be otherwise reserved for human beings. So it's kind of decision-making, prediction, recommendations. The regulation itself is risk-based, which means that it categorizes the AI system into certain risk categories. And these risk categories are as follows. So unacceptable risk, prohibited. That's kind of obvious. The examples of that could be like social scoring or exploitation of vulnerabilities, but the full list is contained again in the annex to the regulation. And the other category, which is relevant from the regulatory perspective, is high-risk AI systems. Again, these are systems which are listed in the regulation, mainly regarding the safety of the components or healthcare or critical systems, but you will find a full range of relevant areas in the regulation. And for these high-risk systems, the regulation creates a certain governance frame, which needs to be observed throughout the entire AI product lifecycle. This means creation of risk and quality management systems, where the risks are identified and evaluated and re-evaluated. Then, of course, the data governance, which is related to the topic of the input, which I was discussing in the beginning. Then you have to have a proper set of documentation, not only in connection to the development of the system, but also in connection to any kind of incidents that will happen throughout the operation. And finally, you need to have available the human oversight during the entire development procedure, and as well during the operations to reevaluate the actions of the systems. Here, I would maybe like to return to the topic of the current regulatory landscape, because some of you who are not producing high-risk AI system or prohibited AI system may think that the regulation is not applicable for you. But still, even if your system doesn't fall in any of the categories, you still need to follow the applicable laws and sector-specific regulation. This is the overview of the most relevant ones, but I would highlight highly recommend that once you start to think about an AI system which you would like to put into practice, think about how humans would be regulated in the area and what would be the threats which the humans would be probably prone to when performing actions such as your AI system, because that will guide you through the set of rights and duties which you need to follow also for your AI system.